Thank you, June. Now I'd like to introduce the nurse manager of the OR at Capitol Health. Michelle Santello Hunt is responsible for managing the OR suites and is going to share with you how the transition from SS1 to Steris NX impacts the OR.
When the FDA announcement first came out, my first and foremost concern was about patient safety and maintaining that safe practice and best care that we can to our patients. However, as an OR manager, it is also my responsibility to make sure the schedule moves efficiently. And in order to do so, I felt that it's the best practice for our area is to keep the sterilization within the core area. This enables my staff to have direct access to the sterile instrumentation that they need so that they can deliver safe patient care. In our facility, our SPD department is directly adjacent to the operating room. So for us, that provides a great overall scenario for the efficient transition of getting the instruments reprocessed. Once utilized, instruments are brought by case cart to the decontamination area where they will be reprocessed. The SPD staff will go through the process of cleaning and decontaminating the instrumentation, and once that occurs, the instruments will be prepared for sterilization. Maintaining best practice is very important to me. Currently, we have an excellent standard of practice in place today, and it's so important to maintain those standards. I have a separate and distinct area for cleaning, preparing, and packaging of instrumentation for sterilization, and for us, this works very nicely. We have had a positive experience with Steris previously, so for our system, it was a natural alternative to transition to Steris NX because it's important for me to keep sterilization in our operating room. Terminal sterilization provides us the best method or process to have a sterile instrument set to be used today, tomorrow, or whenever the staff needs to utilize it. Having terminally sterilized instrument sets is basically, it's a win-win situation. It's a great option to have within an OR since you want to keep that balance of providing safe patient care as well as making sure your OR is running efficiently. Having a terminally sterilized set does help decrease turnover time. I think the transition to Steris NX will be a very beneficial transition to my operating room. I think the staff will appreciate having a terminally sterilized instrument set that they could use right there when they need it, or if they don't need it, then they know it's ready for them at another time, should they need it. To identify what containers we needed to move to the Steris transition, I worked closely with my SPD supervisor, and together we reviewed what containers we have, and we assessed the need to purchase additional trays to accommodate the transition to the Steris NX. During the transition to the Steris NX, it's important to me that my staff is educated and have the proper training that they need in order to maintain those best practices that we currently have in place. So I'm confident, based on my experience with the ASP team, that they'll help me and assist me with providing the knowledge that my staff need to ensure a successful implementation and transition to the Steris NX.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm sure your experiences and advice will be very helpful for our viewers. Next, we would like to bring another important perspective to the table. As you know, the FDA provided an 18-month time frame for removing Steris System 1 from healthcare institutions. Medical device manufacturers were given a 12-month time frame to remove Steris System 1 from their instructions for use. Today, we will hear from major medical device manufacturer representatives and how they are assisting their customers with questions relating to this issue. To talk more about this topic, I'd like to introduce Joseph J. Hauser, Worldwide Director of Medical Device Manufacturers Program for ASP.
ASP, through its medical device program, the MDM program, is working with medical device companies to help them determine primarily instrument compatibility. Medical device companies have a responsibility to give sterilization instructions to their customers for each specific medical device. ASP has a different role. ASP evaluates sterile efficacy for the different STERRAD systems. There are many devices which can be processed in low temperature that actually do better than they would in steam. Devices such as flexible endoscopes, rigid telescopes, light cables, video cameras, delicate instruments. Even though they can be processed in the steam autoclave, they actually may have a longer life in a low temperature hydrogen peroxide sterilization. While the medical device program at ASP has had a long relationship with many medical device companies, it's obvious that the FDA request to remove System 1 from hospitals has spurred the need for medical device companies to even tie closer with ASP to make sure which devices that they manufacture can be processed in STERRAD. Most focus are on the STERRAD NX because it's a short cycle that mimics the cycle time of Steris System 1. It's a difficult time for healthcare institutions. The FDA had given them 18 months to make a decision on what other types of sterilization methods they can reprocess their devices, medical devices in. There are many devices that hospitals use that do not live well in steam. Therefore, low temperature sterilization is really the answer for them. Hospitals have a budgetary system. The hospitals are tight like everybody else. So they must go through a process of budgeting to figure out how to buy new equipment, transition equipment, or change sterilization methods. So in this whole process, they have 18 months. However, many hospitals are starting already. They can't wait for the 18 months because there's some liability that may be evident for reprocessing in a non-approved sterilization system. Alternately, the medical device companies, or MDMs, have a different timeline. The FDA gave the hospitals 18 months to make the transition, but they gave the medical device companies only 12 months. So within that 12 months, the FDA expects that each medical device manufacturer who has Steris System 1 within their instructions will have it removed and will change in its place to something that we'll call a legally marketed device. Well, at least with the medical manufacturers that we're working with. They have told us that once they remove System 1 from their sterilization instructions, they're trying to give the customer the best choice of options, and why many of them are coming to ASP to find out whether Evotec or STERRAD is an appropriate method for their devices. They want customers to be able to move easily from just-in-time sterilization to terminal sterilization or to high-level disinfection. So they're urgently trying to fulfill what the FDA's request is to complete it by 12 months. This means that sometime by this summer, hospitals will start to see instructions for use without System 1, which is much shorter than the time they thought they had originally. Just-in-time sterilization is actually a term that never was here before Steris System 1. It was coined around Steris System 1 to account for the fact that peracetic acid sterilized the instruments. However, as soon as the instruments were exposed to air, they were not sterile anymore. So basically, you had to transport them from the supposedly sterile environment through a non-sterile environment back into a sterile environment. However, healthcare had decided that this was an acceptable means of sterilization. Terminal sterilization is different. Terminal sterilization processes use either steam, something like hydrogen peroxide like STERRAD, or ETO. The devices are wrapped in a sterile wrap or a sterile container. They're processed. They can be then stored on the shelf, still maintaining efficacy inside the container, and then moved to an operating theater where within the sterile environment they're opened. And in that case, they are truly considered sterile. And ASP has actively taken on this and working with medical device manufacturers to help the customer understand different methods of reprocessing.